All right, welcome to lesson 4 for Excel. This lesson is called Working with Charts. So in this lesson today, we are going to be looking at a couple different things with charts. We're going to look at creating and formatting charts and graphs. We're going to be looking at summarizing data using sparklines. We're also going to be looking at identifying trends with data. And then we're going to be looking at planning and creating a chart. So I've got this file that I've included for you. It's EX4-1. And you can see, again, this is the JCL Talent group. And what we want to do when we're working with charts is the purpose of a chart is to kind of give a visual representation of data. And so figure out first what purpose your chart is going to serve, what data and what relationships among data points are you trying to communicate graphically to your audience. So you know, for example, we've got several different cities, and we've got quarterly data, quarterly expenses on those. So are we looking at representing viewing quarterly expenses by city? Are we looking at cities and comparing the quarterly expenses that way? Are we looking at totals by city or totals by quarters? Are we going to do a comparison among just a few places? You know, what kind of data do you want to represent? And once you've got the data points that you want to represent, it's a little bit easier to determine what kind of chart or graph you want to use. And so the first and important component is figuring out what data you want to represent and how you want to plan that. And then once we've determined that, then we can go ahead and we can start creating that chart. So the first thing I'm going to do is, with this 4-1 file, I'm going to go ahead and do a file save as, and I am going to save this one as 4-quarterly expenses. And again, I'm going to save it right to that intro to Office file that I've been saving everything in. So 4-quarterly expenses. All right, there we go. Taking a moment to save that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we are going to select our data range. And so I am going to choose, and it's always important that you include the labels that you want to represent. So we want to look at representing the quarterly data for each city. So I want to make sure that I select cell A4, because that's going to allow me to select the cities as well as the quarters. Now, it's important that when we're doing this, we're not going to include that total data, because that's going to skew our chart. So we're going to, in this one, we're going to create a clustered column. So it's going to be a column chart. So A4 through E12 is the data range that we're going to select. And then again, for those of you using the quick access toolbar, you can go to charts and create your clustered column chart that way. But if you're not using the quick analysis tool, you'll just go up to insert, and then in your charts group, we can click on recommended charts. And then the first thing that pops up for us is a clustered column. Now, the nice thing about Excel is that it kind of gives you suggestions based on the data that you select. Based on those data points, it's going to give you selections or suggest some different selections of charts that would work for those data ranges. And so you can see, you can go through and look at some of these different suggested charts, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to choose that clustered column chart. All right, so when it brings in that clustered column, you can see right now we are looking at cities, and then within the cities, we are looking at how each city fared by quarter. Now, if we wanted to compare the quarters and see how each city performed in the quarter, we could come up to this. Let me expand this a little bit so you can get a better view of it. If we wanted to look at how the cities compared with one another by quarter, we can just come up here and say switch rows and columns, and then now we can see, based on the quarter, which city outperformed the others. And again, so we can look at to see how each city did by quarter. So New York, quarter 3 was their strongest. Philadelphia, quarter 3 was the strongest. Seattle, quarter 1 was the strongest. But if we wanted to compare the cities by quarter, we can do that as well. So we can just look at, see which cities outperformed the others. And so we can see consistently that New York and LA are the tallest little data points over here. Again, so there's a couple different ways that we can do that. All right, so I'm going to go back to the quarterly expenses, and I'm going to go up and where it says chart title, I'm just going to click up here, select that title, the placeholder, and I'm going to type JCL quarterly expenses. JCL quarterly expenses. All right. Okay, and now we're going to move this chart. So we've got this chart still selected. And so what we're going to do here is we are going to move the chart to a different location on this sheet. So we can move it to a different sheet, or we can change move the location around. And to do that, we're just going to hover over one of these borders, get that 4-way pointing arrow, click and hold with our left mouse button, and we can drag it around. So what we want to do is we want to take this upper leftmost corner of the chart, and we're going to drag that until it is in cell A16. So right below that chart. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. All right, and then we are going to move the bottom right point. So the upper left is going to be in A16. The bottom right is going to be in G28, I believe. All right. And again, if we want to make this a little bigger or smaller, we can do that. Okay, so now we've got that chart moved a little bit. And let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so now we've got this chart in here, and then you'll notice that now that we've got a chart, we have chart design tools and we've got chart format tools. So the chart format tools are going to help us format the chart with colors and things like that. Chart design is going to help us add elements, and it's going to allow us to use quick styles and quick layouts. So with this chart selected, we're going to come up to this chart design tab, and in the chart layouts area, we're going to click on that quick layout down pointing arrow. And then you'll notice, again, we can hover over these different layouts, and it will tell us layout 4, what the different features of that layout of each layout is. And we can go ahead and, base the chart on how it appears. Like obviously this one would not be a good one. All those numbers are running into one another. This one has a data table below it, but we're going to go ahead and we are going to choose the chart layout 1. All right. And then so here we've got our chart. We've got our axes labeled, and we've also got a legend right over here. So I'm going to click on that legend, and then when I do that, you can see it gives me the little size handles around it. If I want to move the legend around at all, I can move that legend too. So if I want to bring it down a little bit, I can do that. So again, everything is fully customizable here. All right, so now this chart we've created, if I click on it, you'll notice it's linked to this data. And so here's our axes labels, the cities and the quarters, and you can see that it's linked by this, the color is showing us what data is linked. And so if I come up here to cell A7, where we've got, Miami Beach, and I change it to just Miami. All right, so right now you can see down here we've got Miami Beach. I change this to just Miami. I hit enter, and it automatically changes in that chart as well. So if I change a data point up here, or if I change a spelling or a label, it's going to affect that chart since the chart is linked to that data. All right. So now I'm going to come up here to select my chart again, and I'm going to come up to my chart design tab. And then on the far right where it says location, that location group, it says move chart. I'm going to click move chart. Now it tells me where I can move it. I can move it as an object inside this US sheet, or I can add a new sheet. So I'm just going to click on that little new sheet button. And then it's asking me what I want to call it. I'm going to say column chart. And then OK. And then now you'll notice that it moves that chart out of the US sheet into its own sheet. So this is no longer a worksheet. This is a chart sheet. So you can see we don't have little data. We don't have cells and rows or columns and rows on here. This one we do. So this one, again, this is a worksheet, and this is a chart sheet. So it's moving it to its own chart sheet. All right, so now we can go ahead, and now we've got a bigger view of this. So now we can go ahead and change the chart design a little bit. So I'm going to click the US tab, the US sheet tab, and then in cell D11, where we've got Q3 for Boston, I'm going to change that from the 4300 plus to 4775.20. And then enter. And then if I go back to my column chart sheet, you'll notice that that data has changed. And again, right here we've got our data. Oopsie, right here was for Boston for Q3. And here we've got Boston Q3. If I hover over there, you can see it gives me the series information. Q3, Boston, value 4775.20. And again, if you hover over any one of these column points or data points, it's going to give you information about that series value. All right. So now we're going to make sure we've got that chart selected in our column chart sheet. And I am going to go ahead and change my chart design again. So again, clicking on the chart, get my chart design tab, and then look at quick layouts. And so if we wanted to choose a different one, we can choose a different one. I'm going to choose layout number 3. All right, so that gives me a little bit different appearance of that. So again, if I undo it, these ones, they're all kind of snug up next to each other. We've got our legend down here at the bottom. If we look at this other one, layout 3, we have a legend on the horizontal as opposed to on the vertical. And it gives us a little more depth to these columns. All right. So I'm going to undo that to go back to that first one that we were on. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to change chart type. So again, this is in our chart design tab. Change chart type is in the type. And if I click on that, you can see I can change my type of chart as well. So instead of doing a clustered column chart, I'm going to do a 3D clustered column chart. And then OK. Now you can see here, it gives us a little bit different view of it. And then again, another good way to represent data in this fashion would be a bar chart. So if I click on change chart type here again, I can go to bar, and then now the data is represented horizontally. But again, when you've got multiple series with multiple data points, column or bar charts are excellent ways to represent that data. because we've got several different data points. Now, if you wanted to do a pie chart, you can only use 2 data points. So it would be like the city and then 1 data point. So if we tried to do a pie chart with this data, it would go all haywire on us because it doesn't like those many data points in different series. All right, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to change my chart type back to my clustered column. Okay, and I'm going to go make sure that I'm on layout 3. I'm going to go ahead and save my work. Okay, now we're gonna use our chart elements. So you can see we've got chart elements right over here in our chart layout, but we've also got this little plus sign right over here, and this also has chart elements on here. So I'm going to click on the chart elements, and you can see it's got axes. I've got axis titles. I've got a chart title, data label, data table, error bars, grid lines, legends, trend lines. So I've got all these different elements that I can add or subtract from my chart. I'm going to click where it says grid lines. I'm going to click on that little arrow pointing to the right. And then I can choose what kind of grid lines I want. If I want horizontal or vertical grid lines, if I want the primary major or primary minor grid lines. So you can see if I hover over primary major, I get every $1,000 I have a major horizontal grid line. And so you can see those right over here. If I hover over primary major vertical, it gives me a vertical line dividing each city. If I look at my primary minor horizontal, then we can see that I've got 4 different additional lines in between each 1,000. So that would represent that each one of those minor horizontal lines represents $200 increments. And then the primary minor vertical is going to primary minor vertical is just going to divide those cities into semi-annual periods. So like you can see that it divides them into quarter 1, 2, and then quarter 3, 4. All right, so we're going to choose primary. We're going to click on primary major horizontal to turn that one off because we don't need to have any grid lines on there. Now I'm going to click my axis titles. So if I click on that little box to give a check mark in my axis titles, now you can see I've got a little title box on the primary and the horizontal and the vertical. I'm going to type down here at the bottom where it says axis title for my x-axis or my horizontal axis. I'm going to type US cities. Oopsie, but I'm going to make sure I spell it correctly. And then I'm going to click over here on my y-axis or my vertical axes. And I'm going to type US dollars. And then deselect that. All right, so now I can also do a lot of different formatting when I'm in here as well. So if I select this US cities axis title box, and I make sure I've got the solid line around it, I can come to my home tab and I can change it to the font if I want to. Oopsie, let me make sure I've got it selected. All right. And again, so I'm going to change the font to a Times New Roman. So I'm just going to type Times. All right. And you can see it's changed to Times New Roman. And if I increase it to 11 and I make it bold. Okay. All right. So I've got my axis label over here changed. And now I want to do the same thing over here. But instead of doing everything individually, just like with all of the other programs, I'm just going to come over here, click on my Format Painter one time, and then come over here and then click on that little box, and it will select the whole box and just change it right there. Now I can also format just about, basically everything on here. We can do any formatting to if we want. I'm going to come up here, select this title box. And then here, I am going to go to my Format tab, not my Format tab over, that's in Word. But I want to make sure I'm choosing my Chart Format tab. And here, I'm going to add a border to this. So I'm just going to come over where it says there's text styles and shape styles. Where it says shape outline, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to choose, and again, you can choose any color you want. I'm going to choose this pink accent 3 color as an outline. I'm going to give it a little bit of a shadow. I'm going to do the offset bottom right shadow. And then I'm going to do a shape fill of that same pink color, only I'm going to do the lighter 80% shade. There we go. So now you can see it's got that little border around it, shaded pink a little bit, and then I've got a shadow around it as well. All right, now if I can also come over to my chart elements, and another unique feature is this data table. And so the data table will allow you to, if I click on that, you can see it gives me all of the series point values. So I know what those are if you wanted to have exact values. But again, if you're looking at this online, if you hover over the data point, it will give you all the series information. But if this is printed out and you want exact values, sometimes the data table can be very helpful because, again, if we had data labels, you could see how everything gets a little messed up. All right. So now let's go ahead. We can save our progress. All right, and now since we've got this data table in here, you can see it gives us our values, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. It tells us what color each quarter bar represents. So now we no longer need our legend, since we've got our legend basically right in our data table. So I'm going to just deselect the legend, and that will get rid of that legend. Okay, so now if I'm looking at this and I can see this, we've got these reddish colors and then this gray one. Now if I wanted to kind of be consistent with that more red theme, I could change that if I want. Even though it's given us these default colors, if I want to change this specific column, I can do that. So if I just click on it one time, then you'll notice it selects that column, but it also selects every other column in that series. So every gray column is selected. Now if I come over to my Format tab and my Shape Fill, I can go ahead and select my pink accent 3, lighter 80%. I can choose my plum accent 1, lighter 90%. So I can choose whatever one I want. I'm going to choose that plum accent 1, lighter 90%, and then deselect it. And now you can see it changed it in my legend, or my data table legend, and it also changed each one of those points. All right. So now I'm going to click on Series 3, this quarter 3 one, and I'm going to apply a shape style to that one. So I just did a shape fill on one, but I can also apply a style. So if I click on this More option, you can see I've got all these different options here. I'm going to choose the Subtle Effect Pink Accent 3. So Subtle Effect Pink Accent 3. And again, you can see it changed all of the data points in that series as well as the data table legend. All right. And so now I'm going to go ahead and I am going to go to my Insert tab because I want to add a header to this one. So I'm going to go to my Insert tab, and then over in my text group, I'm going to click on Header and Footer. And then now if I print this, I can have this custom header and footer in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click in the header and say custom header. And then in the center section, I'm going to type JCL US, come on, cities. And then OK. And then I'm going to go to my custom footer. And then in my left section, I'm going to say prepared by my name. And then in the right section, I am going to put the date. So insert date. And then OK. And then OK again. All right, and go ahead and save your work. So we've got that column chart in there. Now we can take a look at adding a different style of chart. So let's go back to that US Cities tab, sheet tab. And now we're going to select a non-adjacent range. So we're going to select A5. So we're going to look at cities, but we're going to look at the totals. So we're going to select A5 through A12. So click and hold an A5, drag through A12, release, and then we're going to hold our control key down and select F5 through F12. And again, make sure you only select that specific range, and then you can let go of your control key and your mouse button. And again, if you added the total, it's going to skew your data. It's going to give you an incorrect chart. So A5 through A12, control, and then F5 through F12. Now we're going to come back to our Insert tab, and then we're going to go over here to our charts. Again, we can look at suggested charts or recommended charts. All right, and we can also see all charts. And so I'm going to click on Pie Chart. And then if we hover over, if we look at these different options, we can see how it differs. And again, so this one's a really cool, I like this chart right here, this pie of pie, because it's going to take one, so you can see it's got it by the cities, but then it also, within the city, it will divide it by quarters. So that's kind of a neat chart. I'm going to choose the 3D pie chart and then say OK. All right, then it brings in that pie chart right here. I'm going to click on that chart title to select it. All right, and just like we did with that column chart, we can also move this, again, selecting the pie chart. We're going to go to our Chart Design tab, and we're going to move this chart to its own sheet. So we're just going to New Sheet, and we will call this one Pie Chart. Okay. All right. And so now with this pie chart, we can go ahead and we're going to change the title name for this one. So we're going to click on the chart title placeholder. And we are going to also go to the Format tab, and then we are going to go to our WordArt styles. So we're going to click on that little down pointing arrow, and we're going to choose the option Fill Pink Accent 3 Sharp Bevel. So Fill Pink Accent Color 3 Sharp Bevel. And then we're going to call this JCL Total Expenses by Office. Total Expenses comma, by office. All right. And then I'm also going to increase the font size of that just a little bit. So select that the border on the outside, and then I'm just going to expand this a little bit to 18 points. All right, I'm going to click on the Houston data point, which is this one right here. So you notice when I click on this chart one time, you can see that each pie has a little fill handle or a size handle by it, the little blue dot, and then there's one in the middle. If I click again one more time, now you'll notice that all of the other ones have disappeared and only the ones around the Houston piece are remaining. And so again, I'm going to click out of this for a second. Click right here. Again, every piece of pie is selected. So if I do anything, it's going to affect everyone equally. But right now, I just want to affect the Houston pie chart or pie piece. So I'm just going to select that Houston piece. I'm going to right click on it and then say Format Data Point. And when I do that, it's going to open up a little box over here on the side. And then you'll notice I've got this option to adjust the angle of the first slice and adjust the point explosion. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the point explosion one. And point explosion means when you explode a pie, it means like one piece is going to get pulled out. So when I start to do this, I'm going to move it to about 15%. But I can click on it and just pull that one piece of pie out a little bit. So it kind of differentiates this. Since this is the smallest piece of pie, this is the one I wanted to emphasize. All right, and again, I could double click on the 0 that was there and just type 10, or I can click it up and down until I get it to where I want to be, or 15 or 20 or whatever. Now I'm going to click on my Chart Elements button, and I'm going to click on the data label arrow. Now it's going to ask me where I want to put the data labels. If I want to add them, I'm going to put them on the outside end. And so you see, if I do it this way, again, since I've only got the piece of pie that's Houston selected, it's only going to do this to Houston. If I come back and select the entire pie, so you can see now, whoopsie, let's go back. There. So we selected the entire pie. Now if we do our data labels, outside end, it's going to do this to all of them. So I'm going to put the data labels on the outside for everything. Now you'll notice that right over here, we've got our data label for our Boston point that's kind of hidden off over on the side. If I click on that label, it's going to select all of them. If I click on it one more time, it will only select the Boston label, and then I can drag, oopsie, I can drag just that Boston. Come on. Get the little four-way pointing arrow over it. There we go. And so I can just hover over that one and move it out a little bit so I can actually see that data point. All right. And so now I can also choose if I wanted to change those from the dollar values to the percentages. I could do that as well. So click on my data label again, and then this time I'm going to do more options. And here I'm going to choose my label options. So it's from right over here in those label options. And I'm going to get this little label options menu. So if it comes up like this, label or number, just make sure you open up expand the label options. And instead of using the value, I'm going to deselect value, and I'm going to select percentage. So now it's showing me what the percentage of each value is. And again, if I wanted to keep the series name in there, I could add the series name. The category name, not the series name. Category name like Los Angeles, Miami. And in this case, if I do that, I can just come over here and deselect the legend because I no longer need the legend if I've got the city names right with the pie piece. And then if I wanted to do a data callout, I can, and again, the callout is just like a little, almost like a little word bubble that just pulls it out from that pie piece. So again, that Boston piece kind of messed it up a little bit. So let's just come back here. And move that one out a little. There we go. All right. And so we're going to do one more thing here. We are going to summarize some data with sparklines. Actually, we're going to do two more things. We're going to do sparklines, and then we're going to do a trend. All right, so let's go back to the US sheet. And then in column G is where I'm going to put these sparklines. So I'm going to click in cell G5. And then I'm going to go to my Insert tab. And then in my sparkline group, I'm going to choose the column. So I can use a win-loss, a column, or a line. I'm going to click on column. Now it says choose the data range that you want. I'm going to choose the range from B5 through E5. And then the location is in G5. I'm going to say OK. And then you can see it pops in that little sparkline column chart right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy or fill this down. And then we can see that there's a little sparkline column chart for each one of those cities. Now I can also change this as well. So if I wanted to change it, I'm going to go to my sparkline contextual tab. And then here I'm just going to click on line instead. So now I've got my sparkline chart. And so let's go ahead and we can format this a little bit. You can go ahead and choose one of these other options if you want. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the plum accent 1, lighter 10%. Where is that one? Come on. Lighter 40. Or choose any one you want, really. I don't care. There we go. So I chose that one. And then I'm also going to add a marker. So I'm just going to click on marker color. And I'm going to choose markers. And I'm going to give my markers the plum accent color. And then if I want to indicate where the high markers are, I could click on marker again, and then high point, I could choose a marker for the high point. So I'm going to say blue-gray accent 6 is going to be the high marker. And so you can see how all the ones that aren't high, the high point of each range is going to be that plum color, and then the blue-gray color is going to be the high point. All right. I'm going to go ahead and save my progress. And then we are also going to look at data trends. So I'm going to go back to this column chart that we've added earlier. And I'm going to right-click on the column sheet tab. And I'm going to choose the option Move or Copy. And then I'm just going to make sure I click on Create a Copy. and then I'm going to say OK. So now I've got my column chart 2. I'm going to go ahead and click on this, right click on it and rename it, or you could double click on it and just start to type, and we're going to call this one Trends. So this one's called Trends. All right. And so now the final thing we're going to do, we are going to go ahead and with our column chart selected, we're going to go to our chart design tab. We're going to switch rows and columns. We are going to eliminate the data table to get that out of there. And we're going to add a legend to the bottom. It's right down there. And then we're going to select New York. So New York is going to be the first one, the plum one. I'm just going to select New York. And then I'm going to come to my trend line option. And I can just click the OK option right there, but I can also click More Options. And so now I can choose how I want that trend line to go. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I want it to go to the last one, the trend line options. And then it's going to ask me what kind of trend line I want, a linear, exponential. I'm just going to choose linear. And then I'm going to choose forward. Instead of 0 periods, I'm going to choose 2 periods. And then I'm going to choose the fill color option. And I'm going to change the width to 2. And then close this one. And then deselect. And so now this is showing us that based on the trend that the New York expenses are growing, by Q2 of the following year, they're going to be at roughly $7,500 as an average for that year. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. And that is that chart. So again, we've got the US that we based all of our information on. We've got the column chart that we added. This is a quarterly expenses by city. We've got the pie chart that was the total expenses by office. And then we've got the trends, quarterly expenses trend. All right, and I misspelled that, I can see, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. All right,